Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk about the 14-point speech that President Woodrow Wilson gave on January 8th, 1918, which is almost an entire year before the war, the Great War, World War I ends. And it's a very interesting document because it basically lays out a plan for peace, and it suggests that a League of Nations is formed, which will help prevent world wars in the future. The question is whether it was successful and whether the United States accepted these ideas and whether other countries accepted these ideas. So in any event, we should take a look at the document and think about how it's organized. So he's speaking to Congress, and he talks about, let's see, things that we first want to suggest. It looks over issues of, there we go. It talks about the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which was the treaty whereby Russia gave up a lot during the war in order to get out of their alliance. And then it talks about a calling for definitions of principle and purpose, and that in this sense, the Russian people were trying to follow their ideals, which is interesting because, of course, those ideals would be communist ideals, which is not something that the United States would subscribe to normally. And it says here, in fact, that the United States hopes to assist the people of Russia to attain their utmost hope of liberty and ordered peace. Let's say the day of conquest and aggrandizement is gone by, which fits in with Wilson's whole idea. He was not an imperialist. He was anti-imperialist. He didn't want to follow the Roosevelt expansionist policies, and he didn't even want to be involved in World War I, frankly. He campaigned in 1916 on staying out of the war, and 1 year later had to enter. He said, "We entered this war because violations of right had occurred, which touched us to the quick and made the life of our own people impossible unless they were corrected." This is an important point right here, that what we demand in this war is therefore nothing peculiar to ourselves. It is that the world be made safe to be fit and safe to live in, and that it be made safe for every peace-loving nation which, like our own, wishes to live its own life, and determine its own institutions, be assured of justice and fair dealing by other peoples of the world as against force and selfish aggression. This concept is known as self-determination. Okay. Sorry. All right. So then he comes up with an idea here, a program of peace, his famous 14 points. Open covenants of peace must take place and transpire. Number 2, absolute freedom of navigation upon the seas, outside territorial waters, alike in peace and war. So that would be helpful in terms of establishing trade and that this would help with working relationships among countries. He also talks, let's see, the removal of economic barriers and the establishment of equality of trade conditions. So in other words, don't put up tariffs, reduce armaments, impartial adjustment of colonial claims, let's see, evacuation of all Russian territory by the Germans, or the Central Powers. Both of them were involved. Belgium must be evacuated and restored, because that's where the Western Front was for most of war, along with some of France. All French territory must be freed. The adjustment of the frontiers of Italy should go back to nationality. Austria-Hungary should be allowed to develop as an autonomous country. Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro should be freed as well. The Ottoman Empire, the Turkish portions should have their own sovereignty. This was the end of the Ottoman Empire, the World War I. An independent Polish state, and most importantly, for working relationships among nations. A general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to all great and small states alike. Key point here, right? This will become essentially the League of Nations, the suggestion that there be a League of Nations. So that is going to be exceptionally important. So those are the plans of peace. And moving down here. So then we have the conclusion. It talks about, interestingly, that we have no jealousy of the United States, no jealousy of German greatness, and there's nothing in this program that impairs it. That, in fact, we wish her only to accept a place of equality among peoples of the world, the new world in which we now live, instead of a place of democracy. So really they're asking, the United States is asking for them to try and be equal and not take on a dominant role. Although it does not presume to suggest that there's any alteration or modification of her institutions, that is the way their politics are established. And he says here that it is the principle of justice to all people and nationalities and the right to live on equal terms of liberty and safety with one another, whether they be strong and weak. This is also another example of his call for self-determination. And this is part of the conclusion right here. This part is the conclusion. Okay, so that's sort of an analysis of this document. Hopefully it helps in doing the assignment. See if there's anything else I need to consider here. Yes, there is something I'd like to consider, and that is the word covenant. A covenant is an agreement, a rather strong agreement, actually, between almost anything. It could be between, for religious purposes, political purposes, a group of people for whatever reason. All right, I think that should help, and we can certainly go over it again during the live lesson if needed. All right, thanks so much.